Krieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially, long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out.
Welcome. You are now listening to Belly Up Fantasy Live. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Of course, as always, joined by Chris Dowhower. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Adam. Feeling a little bit like the Browns today, I believe. Thought I had victory in my hands just to kind of have snatched out fantasy last night. But other than that, pretty good. You had a 30-point lead. You had Lamar Jackson go off for you. You had Aaron Jones go off for you. You had Dalvin Cook left to go. Just had to go 30-point lead. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs left. That's all you had to face.
Yep.
You lost by 30. Up by 30, did down by 30 that quickly last night. So, yes, that's how I'm feeling today, Adam. How are you doing?
Well, I'm feeling like we had very similar Monday nights is what it feels like to me. Given the volume of leagues I have, was kind of on both ends of that. But certainly on one of them, I ended up losing by a point, had a large lead going into it, but went up against Thielen, who didn't do much, granted, and Diggs, who did most of the work. But Thielen had to finish it off, and I ended up losing by a point. So that was fun. I did win a league and then also lose a different league because Dalvin Cook didn't do much. So that was also interesting. But let's go ahead and get into some of these recaps. All right, first of all, let's go ahead and hit on the big news at quarterback, which is Trey Lance is out for the season, which is pretty sad to see. Certainly, we haven't been the biggest fans of his, but hate to see him get hurt. Absolutely. So what do you think this means for the 49ers and the 49ers fantasy relevant players and as we move forward with Jimmy G? And is Jimmy G someone that you're wanting to add at all?
Yeah, so first of all, being a Trey Lance hater and definitely not an apologist for that, I'm definitely heartbroken to see him hurt because I want to be done once and for all. I want to have a guy that has played approximately 11 games of football in the past 3 years. So I'm still waiting to kind of see when we're ever going to kind of move on. But Jimmy G back on the 49ers, that team looked like a rejuvenated offense as soon as he kind of took over at the quarterback. It rained in San Francisco. It wasn't a monsoon per se, but it definitely was looking a lot better through the air for the quarterback position when Jimmy G took over. You saw Brandon Ayuk start getting featured. I think the biggest person for myself that I think is going to benefit this is a combination of George Kittle, who might actually be involved in the passing side because last year we kind of saw while he's been hurt, Trey Lance was struggling kind of utilizing him in the passing attack. And then the running backs, whoever is left standing in this running back backfield, is going to be definitely going to benefit because Trey Lance will be vulturing your touches and vulturing your touchdowns. So I think they're probably beneficiaries. I don't really think it changes Debo or Brandon Ayuk's outlook that much. They kind of were what they were. But I think they're the two biggest things that kind of jump out to me with this injury.
I think I'd be a little bit higher on Ayuk. Certainly, think he could get a little more targets. He was really good the back half of last season, kind of eking into that wide receiver 2 territory the back half of last season after obviously the horrendously slow start. He finished off last season strong. I think he could certainly benefit from having Jimmy G around. That being said, I don't think Debo changes really anything. He's going to continue to be him. But I think you could see a little bit, maybe less of the deep stuff, but more of Ayuk, just getting peppered with targets. Let's move on to kind of, as we alluded, the Ravens game. Lamar had an absolutely stellar fantasy showing. I know you and I both have him rostered in a handful of spots. On the other side, though, a guy that we're a fan of on this show, Tua Tagovailoa, had a fantastic day as well. You had the pairing that, I'll be honest, there were a lot of thoughts, even on this show, from us and from guests and, all over the internet, that Waddle and Tyreek couldn't coexist. I know you were pretty strong that they could, but it certainly wasn't the popular take. even I don't think I was much on that, but they showed that they can. I mean, they both had incredible fantasy days. Tyreek and Waddle did.
Yeah, I think so far credit to Mike McDaniel. He so far doesn't look like Kyle Shanahan. I was kind of believer that he was going to be more of a pass-oriented guy. It was one thing I was hearing from camp was that he was very pass-oriented, Tua-friendly. And having said that, the receivers were a big part of that. This receiving core, what I kind of saw, and this is what I'm always impressed with coaches, is getting guys open and getting your featured guys open. Everybody in the world knows Tyreek Hill's going to be a guy that you're going to try to use. Now, you're going to use it for two ways. What you saw for Jalen Waddle was Tyreek Hill was used as a decoy some of the time, used as a guy that kind of get attention. Look at the guy in the backfield over here. Oh, you forgot about Jalen Waddle, who, by the way, we talked about last week's show, was number 2 pick behind Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase, receiver, and wasn't that far behind when it comes to explosiveness. We saw him kind of limited to that slot roll, glorified kind of 5-6 yard catch opportunities for him, not really getting a chance to show his speed. Well, he's lined up on the outside now. He's got Tyreek Hill taking a lot of attention, and there's very few second corners in the NFL who can stick with Jalen Waddle. So we saw that kind of take off. I think Tua kind of had a great moment in a sense where everybody has that welcome to the league moment, that defining moment. The guy was down major points, led his team back, had 6 touchdowns. And same thing for Lamar. Lamar definitely lost. The Ravens' running game was atrocious other than Lamar. Greg Roman didn't do the best job necessarily for him. But Lamar, while he had 117 years rushing, had that glorious, great 70-yard run, made most of his hay through the air again. And this is kind of reminding me of his MVP year where he led the league in touchdown passes. This is going to be another year where, the game where he had 6 touchdown passes through the air. The guy who's supposed to switch to receiver continues to kind of, go against critics, and so does Tua. So I think this is a great game for both those guys, critic-wise and also fantasy-wise, because you see there's a lot of different mouths they can kind of feed moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Bateman played well. What do you think of this running back situation for really both teams? I know the Baltimore situation is one that I'm trying to stay away from until one of the regular starters kind of returns. But the Dolphins one especially is very interesting, as we've seen kind of 2 guys kind of take over the backfield in back-to-back weeks. And the usage of Mostert specifically was interesting, with him getting some receiving action, which isn't something we've seen him do really much at all throughout his career.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something you might see a little bit throughout this season. Look, the first week, everybody was looking at Chase Edmonds' usage, and they were talking about his salary, and he got paid, and using Ryan Mostert's contract, and Chase Edmonds was clearly the guy. Then this week, it was Ryan Mostert, clearly the guy with 10 carries, 40 yards, led the kind of team on the backfields, ran some pass routes, as you talked about. But it also doesn't make now this week he's supposedly the guy, and Chase Edmonds is going to take second fiddle. I think it's going to be a game plan thing. We look at this talented coaching tree. One of the things they tended to do sometimes is, depending on the game plan, especially when they have a team that's playing a 3 or 4 blitzing linebackers, where your guys kind of take on some bigger guys. We all know Chase Edmonds is the biggest guy. Dolphins definitely have some line issues. So when you're trying to kind of pass protect or chip for different guys, you're going to get the bigger guy out there. Ryan Mostert's the bigger guy. You kind of had him opportunity to kind of be there in pass situations too. And one of the things I think that it might showing you is he's not going to be just based on whatever I have out there. You can guess what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my personnel as an advantage also. So I think that's kind of sprinkled everything. I think you're kind of seeing some of these teams kind of counter what they did week 1 and follow part of their game plan. That everyone's just going to feature one guy or feature 2 receivers. They're going to kind of go through the different things. They're kind of still implementing, their game plans and their strategy. So I think this is going to be something you're going to kind of see in other places, but Miami in particular.
Yeah, no, agreed. So great game there. Another guy that kind of, speaking of those guys silencing critics, a guy that is kind of, at the very least, made a step forward is Cam Akers and Allen Robinson to an extent as well. But them, both getting a lot more involved here, their second week for the Rams. Kind of what's your thoughts there? Because the usage for Akers, while definitely encouraging after week 1, really anything would be encouraging after week 1, still probably not what people expected coming into the year. So kind of what's your thoughts on the Akers situation specifically?
Yeah, so I think I was kind of preaching caution last week. Don't overreact to the Rams backfield. I just talked about kind of what unfolded in Miami. Sean McVay is part of that tree. And when you look at some of the game plans, with how he used Malcolm Brown a couple of years ago, how they used Henderson a couple of years ago, it wasn't every time fantasy people thought they had a clue what was going to happen. They kind of were mistaken. but don't look at necessarily the trends of usage the week before. Look at game plans, look at matchups. Is this a team going to have a hard time for certain backs to kind of utilize? I think last week they were trying to utilize Henderson more for his speed. This week they're trying to get more physical. I think, some of them outsmarted themselves to a degree. I'm not trying to say everything he does is gold, but I think there's a strategy to it in a sense, and I think that's what you kind of saw. So I think Akers was kind of, returned to grace. He was able to actually have more opportunities to run routes than Henderson, although Henderson wound up having the better stat line. It was really funny reading about this because Cam Akers gets usage, but now he's just inefficient. And obviously Henderson's the guy because Henderson was so much more efficient with his touches. But last week when Henderson had the 15, 20 carries, touches, super inefficient, it was like, oh, what are we doing? Give this guy all these touches and don't even bother. So it cracks me up the narrative sometimes around in these backfields and just fantasy in general where it's week one and week, this guy is inefficient and now he's efficient, now he's inefficient. Watch the game tape, see kind of how these guys are being used. Cam Akers more of a hammer back in that game and use it accordingly versus Henderson having more of a chance to kind of be that scat back, have opportunities, having a little gash plays here or there. So I think when it comes to yards per carry, it's not always what it looks like in your stat line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was just kind of like situationally, that's not what you expected Akers to probably be coming into the season. But I think kind of to your point with McDaniel, I think they're trying to just not be super predictable. Both of these backs can kind of do both things. We've seen it from both of them. You're going to run routes with Akers, you're going to run routes with Henderson. They ended up, using the guy on the goal line that or on, short yardage situations that you wouldn't have expected. So certainly, just kind of keep that in mind that they'll both get touches, but, it's not this guy in this game script, this guy in this other game script. They both, can kind of vary pretty wildly.
Adam, I just think this comment real quick. I think people are going to get cute in the beginning of the season, and you'll see, coaches will start settling kind of on the rotation, so to speak, of who they're going to use. You see this in the NBA a lot where coaches will have a great idea what they're going to use. This guy's going to have this role. And so it comes to winning and losing games and who you used to call him plays for. And by week 5 or 6, that'll kind of settle in, and we'll know who the guys are kind of getting game plan. Right now, you're still kind of unfolding. Still have toys to kind of use from the summertime that you've been drawing up all summer.
Right. 2 more games we want to hit recap-wise before we look at what we're doing this upcoming week as far as transactions go. The next game is Atlanta. Well, same game, but going to the other side of the ball. Atlanta played really well with them, and Drake London appears to be kind of in that tier of receiver where he is just the clear guy in this receiving room, which, opens the door to what happened to Pitts and how has he kind of become, at best, really second fiddle.
Yeah, it was definitely, for me, I think, Drake London continues to show you he's going to be a star this league. He's going to have a high usage, probably even his rookie year. The Atlanta offense in general wasn't as good as it was week 1 in my eyes. It still definitely struggled off the gate. Had made the kind of flurried comeback to kind of get, back into the game versus the Rams. Rams could have, were definitely looking better than they were week 1. But overall, I think Atlanta was kind of a victim of itself in a sense where Arthur Smith has some great flaws. But with the Kyle Pitts in particular and some of just the play calling, Cordell Patterson wasn't targeted in the passing attack, for example. Used Tyler Algier, which I was excited to see, but I think they were kind of still trying to find out where their kind of niche is, so to speak. And I think the thing that Mariota knows no matter what is that he knows where London is. He knows the guy's 6'5", he catch the ball. So when he gets to the red zone, he gets in key situations, he's looking for him. And I think Arthur Smith looks at him as that's our stud. I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts isn't a stud too, but very few teams are built around, especially passing attacks, just the tight end position. So usually it's a receiver and a tight end complementing it. So even like as good as Travis Kelce was, and maybe he'll be the guy this year, he did have Tyreek Hill kind of as a top guy also to kind of draw that attention. Other than the Chargers recently, even they have Vincent Jackson over a period of time where he was a star with Antonio Gates. It's really hard for teams to kind of say like we're building our offense around our tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. One last one. What is up with the Denver Broncos? Kind of what's your thought here? Obviously, this offense, especially Russell Wilson in particular, has not quite performed to the level that I think most really expected out of them coming into the season.
Look, you've never heard me put a post up or yell out, "Let Russ cook." I've never been that guy. I've been a Russ hater for a good portion of his career, to be honest. But I was big on him fantasy-wise. I love the weapons. I thought it was an easy transition. And then it's like between him and Nathaniel Hackett, there is a deal with the devil is being kind of cashed in on where you can't even score points for Seattle or the Texans or anybody. You're trying to out-cute yourself constantly where you've thrown the ball about, I think it was 12 times inside the 10-yard line. I think it was 17 total, but they had plays reversed and holds, whatever. But
Right.
you have Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and you refuse to give these guys the ball and hand them the ball out of the Super Bowl. Partly the reason some people in Seattle weren't so sad to see Russ move on. And I think in Denver you see kind of a very opposite approach for that. And right now it's kind of biting them in the butt because Russ doesn't look good. 10 passes 10 yards or more, which usually is bread and butter. He's going bottom third of the league right now. So you didn't see the big play versus Texans. You didn't see anything versus Texans. They had struggled with play calling. So Adam, I'm kind of curious. I've been allowed to take my takes, but for you, what was your take? Because I know Denver's just kind of a team. Just everybody's kind of been excited about this offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still kind of in wait and see mode with them. I'm not gonna super panic yet, but it's just not looking good. Not nearly what I think you would have expected to this point. They do need to feature the running backs a little bit more because they're playing well. Melvin Gordon was a guy who I thought had a really good matchup this week coming in, projecting game script against the Texans. And clearly I overestimated what Denver is going to be able to do, at least early in the season. So hopefully this is a team that can figure itself out. Obviously it's a new quarterback, kind of figuring everything out, but difficult outlook for them at the moment. All right.
Defense kept trying to give them chances.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. But with that, we're going to head into our quarterbacks. But before we do that, we are going to hear from Dan Mater and Manscaped.
Football is back, baby. We're back to seeing Mahomes sling beautiful balls all over the field, and your friends at Manscaped are here to help you sling your beautiful balls all season long. With Manscaped's state-of-the-art tech, we'll have your weapon looking more loaded than the AFC West. Football may be rough, but your ball care doesn't have to be with Manscaped. Join the 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Meet the best valued bundle yet for the Manscaped Pocket Rockets, the Platinum Package. At quarterback, the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, a wily vet who makes sure the unit is running smoothly and scoring nonstop with proprietary advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower limits mistakes and protects the ball. Plus, it's waterproof, so the weather conditions are no issue. At running back, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, built to bust through all the right holes. A hairless nostril just helps it keep a nose for the end zone. On the offensive line, we have our unsung heroes, the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner, the Trent Williams and Corey Lindsley of Sack Protection, standing strong to keep your boys fresh and clean through all four quarters. At wideout, the cleanest duo in the league, the Ultra Premium Body Wash and Ultra Premium 2-in-1 Shampoo plus Conditioner. With their rugged scent, they attract both the ball and all the ladies in the crowd. Plus, these two leave your skin and scalp feeling more hydrated. That means more plays on the field and less water breaks. At tight end, the product makes your end look tight. Manscaped's anti-chafing boxer briefs, a dedicated jewel pouch to increase ball handling and a cool, steady vibe thanks to their moisture-wicking fabric. On defense, there's only one thing you need, the aluminum-free Ultra Premium Deodorant. With refined cologne, quality fragrance, it keeps sweat and locker room scents from making any ground. Plus, it dries clear so the opponent won't even know what hit them. To top it all off, we throw in the best coach in the league, the Shred Travel Bag, as a free bonus. Built to hold the team together, this travel-sized bag has a fumble-resistant zipper. This has got to be a Super Bowl winning roster, but don't take my word for it. Go to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Manscaped for turning your player into an MVP.
Thank you to Dan for reading those in advance. And thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring the show. Definitely go ahead and check them out. Use the code. But as mentioned before, we are going to get into our transactions ahead of week 3. Specifically, who are we streaming at the quarterback position? And we're going to start off with Jared Goff. This is my list. Jared Goff, who plays the Vikings, Ryan Tannehill against the Raiders, and Joe Flacco against the Cincinnati Bengals. Jared Goff, I think, is the easy one. This offense has been playing pretty well so far. And if you watched Monday Night Football last night, the Minnesota Vikings defense looked atrocious. The offense, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say that primetime Kirk shouldn't be a surprise at this point in our lives anymore. I'm not going to necessarily start killing the offense quite yet, but the defense was a significant issue and one that I'm willing to go ahead and attack at this point, especially with how many weapons the Lions have and how that offense has been playing. I think that Jared Goff right now is a great streaming quarterback in a lot of matchups. Ryan Tannehill is another guy who hasn't always performed the best in his big games. Also, I just think the Bills are kind of a meat grinder right now. This isn't something where, as much as I am biased against the Titans, I'm not going to kill Tannehill for how awful last night went. So with the matchup against the Raiders, which is a defense that hasn't been playing particularly well, I'm willing to give Tannehill the benefit of the doubt and run him out there. See what we have. My last one, Joe Flacco. The Bengals defense have made Cooper Rush look pretty good. And also Trubisky had a much better game against Cincinnati than he did, last week. So while there hasn't been big games led up by Cincinnati, they have failed to really punish teams trotting out replacement level quarterbacks. And so while Joe Flacco is a replacement level quarterback, he's a replacement level quarterback with a lot of momentum right now. And I think he certainly has the ability to at least get you to the upper teens, low 20s. And even if he can't carry through his momentum, because the Bengals defense just hasn't been capitalizing on mistakes of other teams, much well at all. So Chris, on to you, who we are sharing one guy and one guy only, and that is Jared Goff.
Yeah, well, we're sharing Jared Goff because Jared Goff's the guy we kind of talked about last week. One of the key things in fantasy, and I think that, the NFL gods smile on offenses in general, creativity and pace. And Detroit uses both those things. Jared Goff's a beneficiary. While he might be a great quarterback, he's a good point guard. He has talent around him. He's going to get more talent with Jameson Williams down the road. Jared Goff might be a guy you can stream right now. And let's talk about the Burst Vikings, whose defense is suspect at best. Also, a team that likes to play with pace. So a game that has a chance to be a shootout and a high-paced game. And the guy maybe hold on to for longer than that, because Jared Goff might be something this year. People want to write him off. But, this isn't the Sam Darnold situation from last year where, Sam Darnold started off the season as a fantasy darling and kind of let up as the season progressed. Jared Goff might be able to continue to do this for a while. Marcus Mariota is the other guy we do share, though, to add. We shared two guys on this list. You didn't have Marcus Mariota. I'm sorry, you didn't have him on this list. This is a guy that took the Lions offense before. We talked about Mariota last week. The guy that if you're not owning and necessarily as a backup, I think he's a good backup option. Just period. And him similar to Goff are two guys I think that people overlooked just because he kind of flared out somewhere else, but they were former number one talents. They were able to produce fantasy wise. I love Arthur Smith and his creativity. I was kind of disappointed with Atlanta in general, kind of with offense what they did, but I think they have a lot of things that they're working with. I think they're going to continue to kind of unfold their playbook and find their timing. I think Mariota is kind of be the beneficiary of that. I like the aggression so far from him. I think that he's pushing the ball more than he saw kind of in Tennessee, so I think rewarded overall. And a team that's looking to get more pace. So once again, Marcus Mariota is a guy that you can play this week with safe legs. I didn't run it quite as much as he had week one, but you still think that you're probably one of the guys who's going to use like more often than not. and then a team that's kind of, like I said, needs to score points. And finally, Trevor Lawrence. Last year I used to, shit on Jacksonville every week I could, basically. Other than James Robinson, it was like, who in Jacksonville can we get this week? Was it going to be Jamal Agnew? Was it going to be Chenault? Was it going to be Marvin Jones? Or was it going to be whoever they threw out? They were trying to find something relevant fantasy-wise, trying to even look at Trevor Lawrence at some point, and nothing seemed to kind of stick. Well, this year, as I talked about, pace and creativity, Doug Pearson kind of brought both those things to his offense. Trevor Lawrence is the beneficiary of it, and he's been able to kind of have a floor. We haven't seen the ceiling per se. We wait for him to kind of break out, but was very efficient last week. And if Trevor Lawrence is going to be efficient and able to kind of spread the ball around to multiple guys, including Christian Kirk, who seems to be clearly his number one guy, as multiple guys using the backfield, playing a Chargers team this week that needs to score points and is going to score points. Loves to play with pace once again. So this is a Trevor Lawrence guy. A guy maybe be waiting for that breakout moment could come, but even a safe floor because he kind of used a little bit of everything and it's been consistent the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think these are all great picks. Mariota is one I didn't have on my list, but certainly one who I think is a great option. Trevor Lawrence as well. If you can get him off of streaming, that's certainly a guy that he's doing better this year. Has Kirk playing really, really well right now. Kirk is a bona fide, great fantasy player right now. A lot of people had pushed him down just because of the narrative around his contract, but Jacksonville definitely a little bit better off this year. Chris, we're coming back to you on the defensive side, though.
Yeah, so we talked about, the offense in Cincinnati, defense in Cincinnati, I should say. Well, part of the reason that Cincinnati is struggling, the defense might have struggled too, because they're on the field a lot. This Cowboy defense is for real. Micah Parsons as a pass rusher is a problem. It's still kind of, will he or won't he stay there full time? Still kind of move around the field. I don't care. For me, this is what I saw in Penn State. This is why I thought he was a top 3 player, top 2 player possibly in that draft. This guy's a game changer. Similar as you saw back in the day, like Lawrence Taylor type of guy, where I just bring it wherever I am. And Micah Parsons is a game changer. They have a defense that's causing problems, and they play a lot of man. This isn't typical, Dan Quinn's not your old Seattle guy where he's running a bunch of cover 3 zones like this. This Dallas team gets up on you. Sometimes they get some big plays, but they also can bring it. And I think this is a team that can get some turnovers. It's going to kind of live off their defense right now with the situation on offense. And this defense definitely stepped up this past week. And Cincinnati needed to kind of show out this offensively, and they could not do so because this Dallas defense stifled.
Yeah,
the other
absolutely.
one I want to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, they continue to lose players. They lost Watt. But he talked about the offense looked a little better. Trubisky, I think, still I try to defend this offseason, possibly a fantasy option or something. It's bad offensively. But yet this defense, despite playing a Cincinnati team where they basically seemed like they're on the field all the time in the second half, and had a game where they basically were on the field a lot again, continues to show out and has a good floor. They get turnovers, they get big plays here and there. They continue to have passers with Alonzo Highsmith kind of stepping up for Watt. So the 3-sack effort, the week 1, they have some guys who can kind of be more game changers than they had last year. They have a good secondary. Mika Fitzpatrick is balling right now, so Pittsburgh can still be a team that can get you some turnovers and get some big plays for you. It's a good defensive stream, and they're playing the Cleveland Browns. So both these teams we talked about offensively are, you want to hide your eyes a lot of the time. So they might turn the ball over.
Bet the under situation.
It could be. This could be a glorified rugby game, and you can see lots and lots of 5-yard passes in this game, and a lot of thirds and nines on those 5-yard passes. So the defenses both have a chance to kind of show out. The one thing I'm worried about the Browns, they had a lot of guys kind of out, as a kind of rest day for them today. I know Clowney's kind of banged up. Garrett's the key for them, but because we know Pittsburgh's offensive line is not good. Trubisky does not do well when he's under pressure. He hasn't turned the ball over yet, but we'll see when he plays this Cleveland team. So this is the two defenses kind of playing each other where, as you pointed, you could probably benefit if you pick up either one.
Yeah, no, agreed there. All right. My set of defenses, I'm going to trot out Atlanta. They have been an incredible fantasy defense, granted just through 2 weeks, so not much of a sample size, but I feel like you have a little bit of a floor with Seattle kind of being so conservative right now. You certainly aren't going to have a team drop 30 on you and push you into the negatives. So I think with how conservative Seattle is being, like I said, you have that floor. Atlanta has been forcing a lot of turnovers. This is an athletic defense. It doesn't have, the crazy top end talent that some of these other great defenses do. but they are athletic, they are aggressive, they've been making plays against some very good offenses kind of to start the year. So certainly a defense that I'm going to keep my eye on. They're a top 6, I believe, fantasy defense right now. So it's definitely something to kind of keep your eye on to start the year. Next up is the Eagles. Their defense played really great. They have a matchup against the Commanders. Commanders, while they have put up a lot of points, so there is certainly a little bit of risk here, unlike, again, with how I mentioned with Atlanta, there's definitely risk. However, while Wentz has been putting up crazy yards, crazy passing numbers, getting a bunch of touchdowns, he's also turned over the ball at least once in both games, I believe twice in one, actually. So there is a high chance for some turnovers to happen here. Also, with Wentz kind of having a Philadelphia return, this is certainly a situation where emotions could, play a factor here. Overall, just with all of the talent they have on defense, kind of paired with, that, I'm willing to take the chance on the Commanders potentially putting up a decent amount of points. And then finally, the Bears. This is kind of a situation similar to what you were talking about with the Steelers and Browns. It's not necessarily me loving the Bears, but me feeling like against the Texans, this could be a very, very low scoring game. So if you kind of want to play it safe, and, I don't think the Bears have crazy upside on defense, but I do think that could be a very short game just based on how much both teams are running the ball, based on how little successes there is passing the ball on both teams. This is kind of one where the score might kind of default you to 8 or so points. So one to kind of keep an eye on if you, just kind of want to play it safe. The opposite option, kind of that Eagles side.
Yeah, rivalry game for Lovie Smith. Oh boy, I can't wait to see that.
Oh, wow, yes. The revenge game.
Adam, I love the Falcons and Eagles thing, and that's one to kind of point out 2 things that they showed last week, and Falcons in particular over the season. Dan Pease is bringing it in Atlanta. They're blitzing the highest percentages as a team, other than the Giants. And kind of where I can allude to that, and why I allude to that is we saw the Miami Dolphins. I know this past week didn't look good, but last year had that nice jump where their defense was definitely a top fantasy option. Was kind of shutting down both running attacks and passing attacks and causing turnovers because they brought it. The New England system, when you blitz out of it, you don't play kind of the Matt Patricia soft ass zone. You can actually be very effective, and what you can also do is stop running attacks. What you've seen Atlanta do is be one of the top running teams versus run. You talk about Cam Akers not having a great game. Henderson didn't necessarily either. Alvin Kamara did in week 1. Nobody's kind of ran the ball versus team. And they had the pieces when you start looking at, they have a good corner, they have a good linebacker, they have good pieces. They're kind of similar to that Dolphins team where it's kind of coming together. The Eagles, looked horrible at week 1. And then similar to last season, they listened, I guess, to their players, and they were like, use us how we're good. And all of a sudden, their coordinator unleashed them defensively against the Vikings. And the Vikings, who were, everybody's talk of the offseason and everybody's first week darling, look like trash because when you have Slay, Bradbury playing man, pressing guys, and that kind of front line that they bring, the Eagles team could be a problem. You talk about playing in Washington team has no return the ball over Carson Wentz in particular. So let's not forget, Carson Wentz usually misses. He misses high. It's usually a good chance for that can go the other way also. So love that pick, Robin.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think as far as the Lions game goes, that people kind of, to your point with Goff earlier, are underestimating that this Lions offense could just be very, very good. As far as the Eagles defense, they didn't look up to what they should have played that game, but certainly it's not like the matchup was as easy as it kind of is on paper.
It was not, but they literally changed their entire scheme from week 1 to week 2, which is similar to what they did last year when their players were basically ready to boycott the defense, led by Fletcher Cox, and they were like, let us do what we can do. And their coach was like, oh, it was got him a job, this offseason, but I guess he forgot again, but now he's back on it, hopefully.
You'll have that. On to just some more general transactions. Raheem Mostert, we kind of talked about him at the beginning. He is someone I want to add on waivers. I don't think he necessarily jumps Edmonds to be the guy. This isn't, oh my God, he's going to be this RB1. I think this is going to be a very good offense. And I think Raheem Mostert is going to serve a role. He has been very efficient in these types of offenses before. He is the type of player just with his game-breaking speed that if he gets 12 touches a game kind of as a, in a tandem type of backfield, that can be very fantasy valuable. He is absolutely the type of guy that can take things to the house with just a couple opportunities. So certainly someone that I kind of have on my radar as an option for fantasy kind of going forward. Logan Thomas is another guy that I want to go ahead and add. And I know you want to, kind of talk on him a little bit as well. But he is returning from injury very, very well. Week 1 played pretty well and kind of took another step forward here. I think Logan Thomas is going to be right back into being a very relevant fantasy tight end. So if tight end is kind of a position that you waited on and you got some of the fantasy darlings of the offseason, like a Cole Kmet, who we'll talk about here in a second, Logan Thomas is probably your guy. Do you want to talk about him while we're here?
Yeah, first I was going to say I agree with the Raheem Mostert point. I think that, this, like I talked about this tree, they've seen there's enough for when these teams commit to having 2 guys, 3 gets carried. 2 guys can definitely both eat and have a role moving forward. This offense looks good, and this running attack necessarily hasn't kind of found its niche yet. It's kind of a timing, running attack for the system. So you have a lot of teams that kind of haven't found that niche, but the passing attacks are working. So that's a really good sign. So it means you get a chance to get some points. And then, for Logan Thomas, with Kyle Pitts basically underwhelming for his beginning of the season, not really sure what you're going to necessarily get right now. And Dalton Schultz suffering an injury and having the the Prescott situation on top of that, and having Cooper Rush as his quarterback. Logan Thomas quietly might be a top 3 option right now for you, where this guy kind of forgot about because you got hurt, but was put up good numbers last year. Got paid really well. Obviously, a priority comes with a system with Scott Turner, who always prioritized the tight end position. Remember, Greg Olsen, and then add the fact that Carson Wentz usually fed the tight end pretty consistently, and it could be quite clear that their best red zone target, who he hasn't really kind of excelled yet, but he's clearly the biggest, tallest guy they had to kind of use there. The other guys kind of benefit off the big plays, but he's the guy who kind of when you get down there, you can kind of make something happen. So Logan Thomas is a steal. And I think a guy that, when you want to just add him, is a guy that might want to be in your starting tight end throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, definitely agreed. He's someone that even if you have a bona fide tight end above him, definitely go ahead and add him. He could end up being someone, especially if you're in a tight end premium, that could flex. He has value, kind of regardless of what you have. My other thing, we've spoken about Drake London a lot this show, but he's someone that kind of across all formats, I'm going to go ahead and buy. Redraft, I think, is where it's the most reasonable to go ahead and buy him. He is genuinely someone where the usage is so encouraging, and he has such a gap on everyone else as far as being the top target here, that I'm going to go ahead and peg him as someone that could finish, wide receiver 2+. And I'm going to go buy him as such. Dynasty, he's in tier kind of, with some great players. Don't get me wrong. Well, looking at T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, those types of players, Amon-Ra St. Brown, although St. Brown is another guy who could kind of, start creeping his way up here soon. But Drake London is certainly the type of player who is in dynasty circles could make his way up, climb his way up to where you're talking about him in the same conversation as, Waddle and Brown and Jamar Chase, those types of guys, if he has a fantastic season. And again, he could be a rookie wide receiver 1. I don't think that's out of his range of possibilities. I'm not going to say I think he will, but I think that's well within the range of what could happen if you're peppering him with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 targets a game. He can certainly make it there. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think this is a simple one. If he's the starter, people aren't, he hasn't, gone crazy yet. This is certainly a situation where you can go ahead and grab him still pretty cheap. And I think he's someone that will be at the very least a mid-tier QB2. So this is probably more so if you're in a super flex. But if you are in a super flex, he's someone who can give you an above average starter at that second quarterback spot, and can certainly be valuable. Now, Cole Kmet is kind of an interesting one. I just wanted to toss out here that if you you're rebuilding, or you're kind of in a situation where you're probably leaning towards making it to rebuilding, and this is specifically for Dynasty, Cole Kmet is someone who has drawn a ton of targets before, and he is running all the right routes. He is doing kind of all the right things. What is killing him is this team just isn't passing the ball. Nobody is going to be fantasy relevant on a team that is passing the ball. What was it, 15 times this past game? Like, this is, I believe I read last night that the Bears have the least pass attempts of any team since 2002. No weapon, whether wide receiver, tight end, otherwise, is going to be fantasy relevant on that amount of passing. So I think that's what's killing Cole Kmet, not necessarily Cole Kmet himself. So he's someone who, I don't know if he fixes if this passing game gets fixed this season. But in Dynasty, I'm not necessarily out on him. I don't think this is a him problem. It's a problem kind of around him, so to speak. So for Dynasty, if you can kind of look to next year, he's someone that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think, Adam, the Bears are going to have to figure out, the forward pass was legalized about a decade ago. So this is probably going to have to curve at some point where you have to attempt more than 10 passes a game and throw the ball over the line of scrimmage. People are killing Mooney, killing Clement, but as you alluded to, what can you do when you're not being thrown the ball? There's no targets to be had. It's not your fault. I love the rest of your list. London, number one of the names you kind of left off on the list, discussions of guys. I was kind of curious. I had a debate with off the air about this. I'm convinced that Jake London is Justin Jefferson, and I think that his career statistics are going to very much reflect that. The beginning of Justin Jefferson's career, kind of how London's career is going to pace. Next Gen kind of scored him as their best rookie week 1. He again was their best rookie week 2. You're seeing the separation. You're even seeing that despite all the targets and kind of him being kind of utilized in offense, he's still maximizing and above what he's getting. So this guy's got a lot more to give. To me, kind of his utilization reminds me a lot of a Cooper Kupp, where he's unguardable. He can move him all over the field. He's 6'5", got great hands, great route runner. But then you have an Arthur Smith, who we know was able to kind of feature A.J. Brown week in, week out and kind of get him the ball somehow, some way. Well, Drew London can get open a lot of different ways and can kind of also do the A.J. Brown stuff. So I think this guy's got superstar all over him, and I just love the star right now.
Yep, agreed. Yep, get him where you can. He's someone where, despite the fact that he just got, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 80-something yards and a touchdown, this is the last time he'll be as cheap as he is currently, because he will make his way kind of into superstar territory relatively soon, and then he's just not going to be someone that you're going to realistically be able to buy. So it's probably that last opportunity for a little bit, and unless they have a slump game here soon.
And before we move on, Adam, I just want to kind of just look at the buy Jimmy Garoppolo, because I want to appreciate the goodwill toward Jimmy G right now, because by 5 weeks from now, they'll probably be killing him again, waiting for Trey Lance to come save the day next year. So I'm just kind of enjoying while Jimmy gets to kind of not be killed for no reason, and Trey Lance is going to have to come save 49ers yet again.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of beautiful, because when you're the backup quarterback, you do get a lot of goodwill. So maybe now people won't kill him since he's coming off the bench, rather than we have this other guy off the bench. Well, you really don't at the moment. Brock Purdy, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. So moving on to your transactions, take it away.
Yeah, I think if anybody's watching the Jets this week, or watch any football, they know the Jets made a great comeback. Joe Flacco and this Jets team is right now throwing the ball 69% of the time, which is a ridiculous rate. It can't continue, but it has through the fourth quarter seems to just be the gate, the floodgates open for this Jets offense, and are able to kind of move the ball. So the beneficiary this past week was Wilson, a guy that we know is extremely talented. We were always kind of worried about where he kind of falls in the food chain, but a guy that I think when you're looking at waivers, especially early on this season, we talked about some of the guys that we're suggesting maybe you stream because you add them to your team. Well, these are guys I'm looking for you add to your now, maybe for upside throughout the season. Maybe they don't come in immediately to produce. I don't think Wilson's going to necessarily have the repeat what he did last week. We love the 14 targets, love the 2 touchdowns, and you see the athleticism. You see these guys gifted. And what you really enjoyed was when Braxton Bears got banged up, they played for 3 or 7 sets. He was the one out there. And this whole offense looked better, and all these guys got the 8. Speaking of, if Wilson's not available, or even if you have extra spots available because you're dealing with lots of injury issues, what a lot of us are, Corey Davis is the guy that receiving core and all the hype this offseason got kind of forgotten about this offense. Well, Corey Davis had 10 targets week 1, similar to last year where he did when he was healthy as the number 1 guy, and then followed up with only 4 targets, but 2 of those catches, one was a big play touchdown. Through the first 2 weeks, the guy who's been out there more than Wilson, more than anybody else, better than Braxton Berrios, for example, has been Corey Davis, number one receiver out there, because he can block, because he can be out there for different routes. Second most route runner on the team to Elijah Moore. So a guy that, the Jets are going to look for different players to kind of feature. Corey Davis has kind of been that safer guy on the other side people kind of forget about. I have a bet in the sense in my own head. I think this is Elijah Moore's week because you haven't seen him kind of pop off yet. Each Jet guy kind of took a turn so far, the receiver-wise, and it's his week. Everybody would assume he's going to be Wilson. So if you want to kind of zig by right zagging, or you couldn't get Wilson, like I said, Davis is a guy I think that people forgot about. Sticking to the younger guys and kind of having upside, Dotson's got 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks right now. So for a guy that wasn't really known for his scoring potential, you got 3 touchdowns already on the board. That's 3 times what Pitts scored entire year last year. And so a guy having a start like that, you want to try to take the shot. You talked about the Washington offense. While they had some turnovers, they also score some points, and they can score some points in bunches, make big plays. You can't key on anybody taking away anybody's offense. Terry Lawrence obviously the top number one. They got Logan Thomas, got a lot of different mouths to feed. But Dotson's quietly found his niche and kind of the guy who's making the best of his opportunity. And I think he's going to find more and more opportunity as it goes. Curtis Samuel doesn't usually stay healthy. And I think that's not a guy who I'm buying for this Washington receiving corps per se. And I think Dotson is the guy to buy. Moving on, it hurts me to say Adam, but Greg Dortch is probably a good waiver wire, especially if Ronald Moore's not returning this week for sure. I watched that Arizona game, and I should say more the Raiders debacle. And while Kyler Murray basically saved the day, the one thing that really stood out to me was Marquise Brown was the big acquisition. Greg Dortch is the guy that Kyler Murray looked for, and that seemed to be open more often than not. I saw that last year towards the end of the season when Wesley got kind of put in there. I don't know if this is a Kingsbury special or Kyler Murray prefers to see the guys who aren't AJ Green or the big time guys, but he's looking for Greg Dortch, and Greg Dortch, as long as he's involved in this offense, is going to be somebody that you have to have, looking at for waiver wire purposes. So, guy I'm looking for, Greg Dortch. And then finally, Evan Ingram. You talked about some upside tight end position, Cole Kmet being a guy. Evan Ingram, and you can comment more on that because I don't really know Dynasty World like you do, but Evan Ingram's a guy, we all love the talent, but. And now that people are going to kind of point to, well, he's been involved in Jacksonville offense, but we're not really seeing any big plays. He had 4 catches, 28 yards. But he's been heavily involved. He's definitely been out there. And eventually, I think some of these routes are going to stop being sideline to sideline and start being through the seams. You're going to start seeing some of these, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk's pass goes to him a little bit more often. So Evan Ingram's a guy I like, but for dynasty purposes, is this a guy that people are, forgotten about, or is this somebody maybe you can buy low on, or do you have any interest in buying low? I know tight ends are tough to get sometimes.
Yeah, no, he is definitely someone that you could go ahead and get, not too expensive, and one who, could end up being your starter. I mean, certainly this is a passing game that's going to have some volume throughout the year. He has that speed, and kind of outside of Kirk, there's not any certainties about what this wide receiver room and receiving room as a whole is. So definitely someone to have on the radar, and for the right price is someone that you'd be interested in. All right. You kind of spoke on Dortch and what, Rondale Moore means in that situation. And something you had kind of mentioned that I wanted to make sure we talked about today was these players that we need to have on the radar coming up, especially, the guys who were put on like PUP or IR that, will definitely be back at around week 4. This is the time to start making sure you get those guys, because you can get some incredible value off of waivers kind of outside your normal weekly waivers from the guys that people weren't able to, stash on their IR spot. Maybe they had 2 guys, they had to release 1, or, just since they haven't put up points yet, they had to move on. But guys like Brian Robinson, Rondale Moore, I've even seen Elijah Mitchell on waivers in a league or 2. These are certainly guys that you might be able to go ahead and find. And if you have an IR spot, you could stash them until, it's time. Obviously not for Rondale Moore, but, you might be able to stash them and not even use a roster spot of your own, or even hold on to them because they'll be back, sooner than later. And that's game or league winning potential in one of my best leagues last year. Sure enough, also Elijah Mitchell, after he had, gone on an incredible run, he got hurt, got dropped. I picked him up and suddenly I had a very, very good running back group once he was healthy. So Chris, kind of talk us through these guys and what you see as far as their ability to elevate your fantasy team once they get back.
Yeah, so for
anyone I missed.
No, well, first I was going to say, you have a great point, Adam, about building your roster and having guys kind of waiting, and so to speak, kind of like your mini team or your mini taxi team that you can kind of hold waiting in redraft leagues as guys kind of wait. But sometimes you don't have those roster spots or those IR spots. Some leagues don't have any. Mm-hmm. Some have very minimal, as you kind of alluded to. Maybe you had to use it for something else. So Michael Gallup's a guy that don't forget. Van Jefferson's coming off bye. So a lot of guys who are coming in that 4, as you pointed out, is a big week to kind of go check back on who's injury updates, who might be coming off, who's kind of running around looking good, because there would be guys kind of go steal now instead of waiting for. But some of the guys you mentioned, like a Brian Robinson, for example, this whole offseason, people have been beating the Dameon Pierce bandwagon, and can't wait to Dameon Pierce is going to be the guy. And he got a lot of carries this past week in Texans, and he got you about 6 points, 7 points probably when rushing, didn't really was involved in the passing attack. But for me, Brian Robinson is kind of your safer Pierce, an offense that's obviously more explosive, has already been so, and still has an opportunity, was going to be the clear back in the backfield in the sense of the early down back, I should say, is probably the preferred guy used in the red zone. And just the fact that he's going to be in the red zone, to me, is a huge bump over a Dameon Pierce, for example, who's going to have to really have things work out really well for Texans to kind of continue to be down there. So I think this is a guy that if you're looking to have like that, structured early down back guy, and you don't want to sit there and wait for some other guy to hit, or some of these guys aren't kind of panning out for you. This guy has to be one of the safer guys that you can kind of get there for those easy points and some upside potential for a touchdown opportunity. And then some other guys talked about, like Rondell Moore. To me, look, I know Marquise Brown was like the big acquisition we talked about. DeAndre Hopkins is number one receiver. They brought AJ Green back for I don't know why. Greg Dortch is involved, but all those different guys we named, maybe beside Marquise Brown, and even that I might challenge to a great. Rondell Moore to me is the most explosive guy of all of those guys. And while I love Marquise Brown, Rondell Moore's a better route runner. People don't realize because he was used as a gadget player last year. Go back and watch tape in college. Watch this guy play. This guy is a lot like Tyreek Hill, a little bit shorter, but brings that kind of element to the game. When you have that ability in an offense that kind of has to spread the ball around, obviously has a terrible defense right now, and whether the Arizona is going to get be in the game or get blown out, they're going to throw the ball consistently. To me, this is a guy that can have a lot of upside for you, and everybody forgot about, but he's good, and he has a chance to kind of shine out in his opportunity this year. Christian Kirk moved on; those targets are there,
and Christian Kirk got overpaid because of the role that Rondell Moore is now inheriting in this offense, and that's the role that Dortch is now kind of abusing. Now, this is a role that is, I think Rondell Moore is a great fit for it, and I think he's going to be maybe more productive than some of these other guys would be, but I think this is a role that kind of in and of itself will be productive regardless of who's in it, as long as they kind of meet that certain skill set.
Well, I read a great article real quick, just off topic, but the spread offense in the air raid in particular. So we see USC been scoring lots of points lately, and that goes with the coach they brought from Oklahoma. He traces his kind of his homage back to Hal Mummy and that great kind of air raid offense. And one of the key things that Hal Mummy kind of pointed out was the system helps guys open, but when you have great players and you have superstars in that system, that's a game changer. So he was pointing out kind of where he is for USC and where they can go and recruit versus what they were doing at Texas Tech or some other schools. Mm-hmm. You can get good talent like a Washington or Washington State, but you're not getting some of the top tier guys. When I talk about Rondell Moore, this is an elite athlete, a guy, like I said, go back and watch the tape when he was at Purdue. He's a lot like Tyreek Hill. Put him in an offense where these guys like Greg Dortch get open. What can this guy possibly do? So yes, great point, Adam.
Yes, absolutely. All right. You know how we normally wrap up this show. So Chris, from the Mountaintop Oh Great Oracle, what is our biggest takeaway kind of going into next week, coming from last week? What should the people, if they're going to take away one thing from this show, what should that be, kind of moving forward?
I'm going to say it. It's almost a repeat from maybe a cop-out from last week. Don't overreact from this week either. It's going to be a couple of weeks. You're seeing a lot of coaches still figuring out their game plan, still kind of figuring out their players. And every time you think you assume that you know a guy who's going to be, you wind up having a situation like the Giants where Tony starts, you're all excited, and then he's not involved and gets 2 targets. So there's just so many different situations where Kenny Golladay is getting paid $17 million and gets 2 snaps. There's too many things to guess right now to kind of assume Kyle Pitts is going to be killed. If Kyle Pitts doesn't do anything this week, in the end of the world necessarily. Just kind of watch what you're seeing, kind of go with game flow. Because a lot of times these things, especially stats-wise, are dictated by the game flow. We talked last week about Joe Flacco. Could he throw the ball again as much as he did? He did, so he had great numbers. One other guy we recommended was Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, because he had the volume he had the first week one, the Colts, well, obviously didn't, so that's not something you can sustain. So there's a whole difference when it comes to like what you did previous week to this week, upcoming week. And I just want to caution people, don't overreact or overanalyze that you think you know it all yet. Wait a couple weeks, and as you always allude to, Adam, keep buying low in the meantime. When people kind of panic or want to sell something because this guy's done, you be there scooping them up, waiting to see. Maybe you can find diamond in the rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to piggyback on that. I'm also kind of copying out a little bit. But kind of to jump into there, don't panic about your team either. You shouldn't panic on, specific players either. But, last year, for instance, I, in one of my leagues started 1-5 and I came back, made the playoffs, made the championship. So that's coming back from 1-5. You can certainly, fantasy football is very streaky. So what I just want to iterate is, if you're 0-2, listen, there probably be things that you're trying to look at, trying to figure out why you're 0-2 and, what you can kind of do to, fix things going forward. But that doesn't mean you drafted poorly. That doesn't mean your team is bad, just in and of itself. You could absolutely still turn it around with largely the core you currently have. Am I saying no, don't make transactions? No, you should be making moves still. However, don't force moves just because you think your team is bad. There are great players like a Dalvin Cook, for instance, who has just underperformed. And I don't think, either of us will confidently say, he's not going to turn it around. Or a Derrick Henry. Like, these are the types of guys that, if you have a Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry tandem, you're probably doing very poorly right now. But realistically, throughout the whole season, I think you'll still be all right. So just don't overreact to maybe your record right now. And then on the flip side, you could still fall apart from 2-0 very quickly as well. So don't kind of forget to, don't get lazy with your transactions if you're 2-0 either. Make sure that you are still scouring the waivers as if you're 0-2, and make sure that you're still trying to buy low and still being aggressive with your moves because you haven't won the league yet at 2-0. So don't feel like, just because you're 2-0 and you're, number 1 or number 2 in the league in points for, it's 2 games. We have a crazy small sample size, a long time to go. Your record means nothing right now. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Don't overreact to anything right now. Just make sure
But real quick, Adam, while you're doing that overreacting, do look for, we're talking about looking for value, look for patterns, certain things, especially when it comes to statistics and how things can kind of unfold. As you talk about Dalvin Cook, you love the fact that he's out there in past situations. He's averaging 5 targets a game. Lineup as I think it was 7% of the time, he's not lined up in the backfield, using him as a slot or the outside receiver. These are all things that are going to pay off. And Ramondre Stevenson, people are always not catching the ball out of the backfield, but running the most pass routes out of the backfield for the Patriots. So while it's not necessarily materializing yet, it does have the things that we're looking for. So people panic a lot of times when they don't see what they want to see. Just kind of look underneath the surface. Sometimes there might be little things that are brewing there for you. Even Kyle Pitts, for example, using context. Well, he's the second leading targeted guy on Atlanta, so maybe there's not a position where they had to throw the ball so much to him yet, but eventually he'll get his chance. So there's a lot of times too, like Cole Clement talked about, he's done, he's a scrub. It's what you saw from him being able to do with Hawkinson, who's gotten 7 or 8 targets right now per game and isn't producing, versus a guy who their whole offense doesn't have 7 or 8 targets pretty much to the receiving core, and that's supposed to figure out from there. So yeah, I think it's something that you don't want to react to, but you also want to look for trends and be smart in a sense of what you can find things.
No, absolutely. I mean, last week, for instance, just as an extra example, and we can kind of make our way out of here, but when I had mentioned Juwan Johnson as someone I wanted to buy, it wasn't at all because of his stats. It was because of the usage was interesting. He was running routes. He was on the field a lot. And then this week, he does get the targets kind of that you expect. So definitely, Chris, to that point, those trends of, all right, are you running a lot of routes? Are you getting a lot of snaps? Are you getting, targeted in key situations? Those things can kind of matter more, especially early on in the season, than, how those things actually turned out, because, a lot of these guys, they're getting those targets and they're getting those snaps because of all the work they've been putting in for, months and months, which is a much better sample size of what they're capable of than the past 2 weeks.
And also make notes of the coaches to adjust, like a Sean McVay, where Allen Robinson clearly didn't get the ball week 1 while he did run the routes. When the coach said, we're going to make sure we use him and he'll be a primary read more often, he was, and he benefited, especially in the red zone, similar to OBJ last year. So I think it is also important to know what coaches are open to change as well.
Absolutely. All right. Chris, what is going up in Belly Up MDFF Nation this week? And how did things go this past week? Do you hit on any bets, hit on any DFS stuff?
Well, we had some different things. I gave you guys some upset tips in some of the weeks that did pan out. I told you don't be surprised if Dallas gets a Cincinnati game. So we definitely are going to continue to talk about it on our Friday show where we do our cash in our tickets and give you some bets tips for the week. We should be joined by Chaz Fleury this week as well, so we're excited to have him back and kind of giving us his expertise as well. And on Thursday, we have our Clairvoyant Thursdays. We'll be looking ahead to the late games, kind of giving us our take of what we see to happen, who the guys you should be playing, kind of avoiding, or who you should be thinking about maybe, off your radar, maybe putting on your radar for different reasons. So we'll be covering that, and every Wednesday, Dan continues to cover himself with the show early games for this past week. For the upcoming week. On Wednesday nights, he covers the upcoming games for the early games. So all that's look ahead on Wednesday. So 5 nights a week, Belly Up, 5 nights a week, MDs. So check us out.
Yes, absolutely. Also, go make sure tomorrow night to go hit Chase and the gang with the Belly Up Fantasy Live show tomorrow. They'll also be doing Sunday. Sunday's show is led by Andrew LeDuc. They are all great. Make sure you hit up those. I believe, like I said, tomorrow is at 8. I believe Sunday is at 10:30 or 11, somewhere in there. But those will be on all the same channels you are viewing or listening to this on. So again, make sure you do that. Make sure you put in questions, by the way, to the Sunday show, because that's where they'll do, your start sits, some trade advice, anything like that. That crew is also good with Dynasty. So if you have Dynasty questions, make sure you ask that there. They are very good at, accumulating questions throughout the week and kind of running through them all on a live format for you. So just tune in, ask a couple questions, and kind of, see what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, last week we had some guys that situations injury-wise changes this season. The week progressed.
Yeah.
Some tips to guys to pick up. They didn't wind up playing. So listen to, Sunday morning is kind of the key to kind of making sure you're updated to the most recent guys and make sure you have on your radars and making adjustments accordingly.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, take care. We will see you next Tuesday, and good luck in your games this week.
Read Denzel, man.